I was wrong. Everything I believed, everything I defended, everything I was willing to die for was a lie. I spent my life convinced that I had the truth. I studied. I debated. I defended my faith. I mocked Christians, called them blind, lost, deceived. I believed that Jesus was just a prophet, that the Bible was corrupted, that anyone who worshipped him was committing the greatest sin imaginable. I thought I was enlightened. I thought I had all the answers. Then I died. And in that moment, I saw something that shattered everything. Maybe you think you know the truth too. Maybe you believe, just as I did, that there is no salvation outside of what you've been taught, that Christians are misguided, that Jesus is nothing more than a man. But what if one day you opened your eyes and realized you were wrong? My name is Omar Hassan. I was a devout Muslim, not just a follower but a defender, a scholar, a professor of Islamic theology. I had spent years of my life proving that Christianity was false, that Jesus was only a prophet, that the Bible had been changed. I was so sure. Then one night everything changed. It started with a phone call. I had just finished evening prayer when my phone rang. It was my wife. "Omar, your brother. He's been in a terrible accident." My chest tightened. My pulse raced. I grabbed my keys and ran to my car, my mind clouded with fear. The streets of Dubai were slick with rain, the glow of the city lights reflecting on the pavement. I gripped the wheel tightly, whispering prayers to Allah. "Ya Allah, please don't take him." I pressed the gas. Faster, faster. My heart pounded in my ears. I needed to get to the hospital. I needed to see my brother. I didn't see the truck, a blinding flash, a blaring horn, screeching tires. Then, impact. The world spun violently. Metal, twisted, glass shattered, and a pain unlike anything I had ever felt shot through my body. My mind screamed, but my voice never made a sound. My head snapped back, my vision blurred, and I felt the warmth of blood soaking my skin. Everything slowed. My heartbeat grew faint, my breath weakened. I was dying, and in that moment, as my soul began slipping away, I had only one thought. Is this how it ends? Then, silence, not darkness, not emptiness, just silence. I should have woken up in a hospital, but when I opened my eyes, I wasn't there. I was falling. But it wasn't like falling through the air. There was no wind, no resistance. It was deeper, like being pulled into an abyss where time and gravity no longer existed. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. All I could do was watch as the darkness swallowed me whole. Then everything stopped. I wasn't falling anymore. I was standing. But where? The ground beneath me felt solid, yet I couldn't see what it was made of. A vast, endless space stretched. Around me, neither dark nor light, neither warm nor cold. The atmosphere felt different, almost as if it wasn't meant to be experienced by human senses. Then I heard it. A sound. A low, powerful hum vibrating through everything around me. And suddenly before me, 3 figures appeared. They weren't human. They weren't like anything I had ever seen. Towering, radiant, overwhelming. Their forms shimmered between light and something else, as if they existed in multiple dimensions at once. Angels. I knew it instantly. But not the way I had imagined. Them. Not the soft, winged beings from paintings and stories. These were warriors, messengers of judgment, and each of them held a massive golden book. As they opened the books, the hum in the air intensified. The pages glowed, their inscriptions unlike any language I'd ever seen, yet somehow I understood every word. I tried to move. I couldn't. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. Then a voice shook the very fabric of existence. Omar Hassan. It didn't come from the angels. It came from everywhere. From above, from below, from within me. It wasn't just heard. It was felt. My soul trembled. One of the angels turned a page, and suddenly the book came to life. The words lifted off the page, forming moving images in the air before me. I saw my life, every moment, every choice, every action, played back in perfect clarity. I saw myself praying, teaching, debating Christians. I saw myself mocking the idea of Jesus being God. I saw myself reading the Bible, not to understand, but to disprove it. And then I saw the things I had ignored, moments I had forgotten, times when the truth had been placed before me and I refused to see it. I saw the Christians who had tried to talk to me, the conversations where I felt something stir in my heart. But I silenced it. I saw the questions I never allowed myself to ask. The air grew heavier. This wasn't judgment as I had imagined it. I was supposed to be standing before Allah, weighed by my deeds, waiting for the gates of paradise or the fires of hell. But this was different. I wasn't being asked about how many prayers I had performed or how many times I had fasted. I was being shown the truth, and then I felt it, a presence more powerful than the angels, more powerful than the voice that had spoken my name, a presence that demanded surrender. I turned, and there, stepping forward from the infinite horizon, was a man. He wore a robe white as light itself, flowing as if it were woven from the very fabric of creation. His eyes burned, not with fire, but with something deeper, something eternal. There was no hatred in them, no condemnation, only truth. I had never seen him before, but I knew exactly who he was. Jesus, my entire body locked in place. My thoughts scrambled, desperate to make sense of what I was seeing. This wasn't possible. I had spent my life denying him. I had spent my life proving that he was just a man. But now, standing in his presence, feeling the weight of his authority pressing into my very soul, I knew I had been wrong. A voice inside me screamed, "Run! Deny him! Fight it!" But I couldn't. I dropped to my knees, my whole body trembling. "This isn't real," I whispered. "This is a test, a deception." Jesus didn't move, he didn't argue. He simply looked at me, and suddenly I saw myself, not my body, my soul. I saw my pride. I saw my arrogance. I saw my hypocrisy. I had believed I was righteous, that I was doing everything right. But now, standing before Jesus, I saw what I truly was. I saw every moment I had ignored him, every time I had been presented with the truth and rejected it. And for the first time in my life, I was afraid. I covered my face with my hands. "I followed Allah," I whispered. "I obeyed, I prayed. I did everything I was supposed to do." Jesus took another step toward me. His presence grew heavier, stronger, undeniable. Then he spoke, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." His voice pierced through me like fire. I shook my head violently. "No, that was added. The Christians changed the Bible." Jesus lifted his hand, and suddenly I was no longer in the tribunal. I was in ancient Jerusalem. I saw him preaching to the crowds. I saw him healing the sick. I saw him telling the Pharisees, "Before Abraham was, I am." I saw him crucified, beaten, broken, bleeding, his hands nailed to wood. I saw him rise from the grave, and then I was back, kneeling before him. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't deny it anymore. Jesus wasn't just a prophet. He wasn't just a messenger. He was exactly who he said he was. He was God. And my heart began to tremble. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. Jesus stood before me. Everything I had believed my entire life was collapsing. For years, I had debated Christians, mocked their faith and dismissed their beliefs. I had spent my life proving that Jesus was just a prophet, just a man. Nothing more. But now, he was here, and I could feel his presence crushing every lie I had ever believed. Everything inside me wanted to run, to deny what I was seeing, to tell myself this was a trick, a deception, a test from Allah. But I couldn't look away. I had spent my entire life rejecting Jesus, but Jesus had never rejected me. He stepped closer. His robe radiated light, but it wasn't just brightness. It was power, truth, authority. It wasn't a light that could be resisted or ignored. It was a light that demanded surrender. I tried to look down, but I couldn't. His gaze held me in place. Omar, the sound of my name coming from his lips, shook my soul. No anger, no condemnation, just truth. And in that moment, something terrifying happened. I saw myself, not my body, my soul. I had always thought of myself as a righteous man, a man who followed the law, a man who prayed, fasted, gave to the poor, a man who did everything required of him. But now, standing before Jesus, I saw what I really was. I saw my pride. I saw my arrogance. I saw my hypocrisy. I saw every time I had used religion to elevate myself. Every time I had silenced doubt instead of searching for answers. Every time I had ignored the voice whispering inside me that there was something more. And for the first time in my life, I was afraid. I dropped to my knees. "This isn't real," I whispered. "This is a test, a deception." Jesus didn't move, he didn't argue. Instead, he raised his hand, and suddenly the air around us changed. The swirling sky above me opened, and I saw my life, not as I remembered it, but as it truly was. I saw the faces of every Christian I had debated, mocked, or dismissed. I saw the times I had argued, convinced that I had won. I saw the moments when truth was placed before me, and I refused to see it. I saw myself reading the Bible, not to understand, but to tear it apart. And then I saw the moments I had forgotten, moments when my heart had stirred, moments when I had heard something in the words of Jesus that felt different, moments when I had wanted to know more, but had pushed it away out of fear. The vision vanished. I gasped, my whole body shaking. I looked up at Jesus, my mind screaming for an answer. I followed Allah, I whispered. I obeyed. I prayed. I did everything I was supposed to do. Jesus did not move. I clenched my fists. "You're not God," I said, trying to regain control. "You never claimed to be." Jesus looked at me, and then he spoke. "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." His voice pierced through me like fire. I shook my head. That was added. The Christians changed the Bible. Jesus raised his hand again, and suddenly I was standing in ancient Jerusalem. I saw him preaching to the crowds. I saw him healing the sick. I saw him telling the Pharisees, "Before Abraham was, I am." I saw him crucified, beaten, broken, bleeding, his hands nailed to wood. I saw him rise from the grave, and then I was back, kneeling before him. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't deny it anymore. Jesus wasn't just a prophet. He wasn't just a messenger. He was exactly who he said he was. He was God. I covered my face with my hands. "I was wrong," I whispered. Jesus knelt in front of me, his voice soft but firm. "You have always known the truth," he said, "but you refuse to see it." I sobbed. "What have I done?" Jesus stood, and suddenly the air grew heavy. The light around us flickered. A chill ran through me. Something was coming. Jesus turned his gaze to the horizon. I followed his eyes, and I saw the darkness rising. I heard voices, whispers, echoes, screams. Something was waiting for me, something that had been waiting for a long time. And now it was coming to claim me. I looked back at Jesus, panic rising in my chest. "What's happening?" I asked. But deep down, I already knew. I had rejected the truth for too long. And now, the darkness had come for its prize. A chill ran through me. The once blinding light of the tribunal flickered, and an unnatural darkness slithered at the edges of my vision. Something was coming. I turned back to Jesus, desperate for answers, but he said nothing. Then I felt it. A force. A pull unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't physical, but it was stronger than chains, stronger than gravity itself. It gripped my soul and began to drag me backward. A rush of panic filled my chest. My body trembled as my feet slid against the ground beneath me, pulled by an unseen force. "No!" I gasped, clawing at the empty air, trying to resist. "No, no, no!" The darkness crept closer. I felt something cold and wet wrap around my ankles, tendrils of shadow slithering up my legs, gripping me tight like hands with no form. And then I heard them. Whispers, hundreds, no thousands of voices hissing, murmuring, calling my name. "Omar Hassan, you are ours." My breath caught in my throat. I turned toward the darkness, and suddenly figures emerged. At first, they were nothing more than shapes, shadows moving unnaturally, twisting and shifting. But as they drew closer, I saw them clearly. Their faces were not human. Eyes sunken deep into their skulls, mouths twisted into permanent jagged grins. Their skin, if it could be called that, was charred and cracked, as if burned from the inside out. And yet, I recognized some of them. I knew them, not from this world, but from somewhere deep within me. Memories flooded my mind. Times I had felt anger, hatred, arrogance, cruelty. These were not strangers. These were the voices that had whispered in my ear my entire life. All those years, one of them sneered, its grin widening unnaturally. "We were with you. You heard us," another one hissed, "and you obeyed." A third leaned in closer, its breath like rotting flesh and burning sulfur. "You rejected him," it whispered, its eyes narrowing. "You chose us." I shook my head violently. "No," I gasped, struggling against the force pulling me deeper. "I didn't choose you, A shriek split the air. It wasn't from me, it came from the abyss itself. I turned my head and saw it. A chasm opening behind the demons, blacker than the darkest night. It wasn't just darkness, it was emptiness. The absence of everything good, everything warm, everything real. And it was pulling me in. I screamed, my hands clawing at the ground, trying to resist. The demons laughed. I looked at Jesus. He hadn't moved. He simply stood there, watching. His eyes were filled with sorrow. And something else. Judgment. I felt something snap inside me. Desperation took over. "Jesus!" I screamed. "Help me!" The demons shrieked in fury, their voices colliding in an ear-piercing wail. And then everything stopped. The darkness froze. The whispers silenced. The abyss itself seemed to shudder. A voice, more powerful than thunder, more final than death itself, echoed through the void. "He does not belong to you." The demons recoiled as if struck, their twisted forms convulsing, their flesh burning. A bright golden light exploded from Jesus, illuminating the entire space. The darkness screamed. The abyss collapsed inward, pulling the demons with it. Their clawed hands reached out, grasping, desperate, but they were being dragged back, their bodies disintegrating into nothingness. The force pulling me vanished. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. My whole body trembled. I looked up at Jesus. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with absolute authority. "You were never theirs," he said. Tears filled my eyes. "But I rejected you," I whispered. "I fought against you. I denied you. You were blind," Jesus interrupted, his voice filled with unwavering certainty. "But now you see." I lowered my head. Shame washed over me. I had spent my life fighting against the very one who had just saved me. I had mocked his name. I had rejected his love. And yet, he had come for me. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. "What now?" Jesus extended his hand. "Come and see." I hesitated, staring at his outstretched hand. Then slowly, I took it. The moment my fingers touched his, a warmth, unlike anything I had ever felt, rushed through me. I gasped. The world shifted. The last remnants of darkness disappeared. The tribunal was gone. I was somewhere else, somewhere new, and in that moment I realized this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I opened my eyes. At first, everything was blurred. Shapes, lights, muffled sounds. My body felt heavy, weak, as if I had been crushed under an unseen weight. Then I heard it, a sob, soft, desperate. I blinked, my vision clearing, and saw a familiar face leaning over me. My wife. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clutched my hand. "Omar! Omar, you're awake!" Her voice trembled, filled with relief, but I couldn't answer her, I couldn't speak, because the moment my mind became clear, everything rushed back at once. The tribunal, the angels, the book of life, Jesus, the abyss. I gasped, my chest rising sharply as the memories flooded me. My body trembled. It was too much, too real. I had died. I had seen Jesus, and now, somehow, I was back. I felt a sudden ache deep in my soul. Not a physical pain, but something inside me had changed forever. I wasn't the same. I could never be the same. Doctors rushed into the room, voices speaking in rapid Arabic. Machines beeped around me, nurses adjusting wires and IVs. I barely heard them. All I could think about was what I had seen, what I now knew to be true. For years I had rejected Jesus. Now I had stood in his presence. For years I had mocked Christians. Now I knew they were right all along. For years I had convinced myself I had the truth. Now I knew the truth had a name, Jesus Christ. Days passed, but I barely spoke. My wife kept asking what was wrong, why I seemed so different, why I refused to talk about what happened. But how could I? How could I tell her that everything we had been taught was wrong? How could I tell her that the faith we had built our lives on had blinded us from the truth? How could I explain that while I was dead, I had stood before Jesus, and he had saved me? I wasn't ready. Not yet, but deep down I knew one thing. I couldn't stay silent forever. A week later, I did something that changed everything. I met with a close friend, a man I had known since childhood, a fellow Muslim scholar, a man who, like me, had debated Christians for years. If anyone could understand my struggle, it was him, so I told him everything, from the moment I died to the moment I woke up. I told him about the tribunal, I told him about the angels, I told him about Jesus, and when I finished, his face was pale with horror. There was silence. Then he stood up sharply. "You have been deceived," he said coldly. "This was a test, a trick. The devil has poisoned your mind." "No," I whispered. "I saw him. I felt his presence. He—" "Stop!" he snapped. His eyes burned with rage. "Do you realize what you are saying? You are calling Jesus God. That is shirk, the greatest blasphemy." I swallowed hard. "I know." His nostrils flared. "Do you know what happens to people who say these things?" I did. And for the first time, fear gripped me. I had lost my faith in Islam, and in my world that meant losing everything. I could lose my family, my career, my life. Maybe he saw the hesitation in my eyes because his expression softened just a little. He sighed, stepping closer. "Brother," he said, voice quieter now. "You were confused. You were dying. Your mind played tricks on you." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to convince myself that I had imagined it. But how could I? I had seen Jesus with my own eyes. I had felt the darkness trying to take me. I had heard his voice commanding the abyss to let me go. How could I pretend that wasn't real? Tears filled my eyes. "I can't deny what I saw." His face turned to stone. "Then you are no longer my brother." And just like that, he walked away. That night I sat alone in my study, staring at the books I had once cherished. The Quran, Islamic philosophy, the theological arguments I had used against Christians. They all felt meaningless now. Then my eyes landed on something else. A Bible. It had been given to me years ago by a missionary. I had kept it, not out of belief, but so I could debate against it. I reached for it, my hands shaking. I didn't know where to start, so I flipped through the pages, and then my eyes landed on a verse. John 14:6, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." My breath caught in my throat. These were the exact words Jesus had spoken to me. Tears streamed down my face. It was all true. Jesus wasn't just a prophet. He wasn't just a messenger. He was God. And in that moment I made my decision. I knew what it would cost me, but I could not deny him. I could not reject him again. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in my life, I whispered the words that had once been impossible for me to say. Jesus, I believe in you. A warmth filled the room. It wasn't fire, it wasn't heat, it was peace, and I knew I had finally come home.